Today's show, I explained how Alaska has non-citizens registered to vote and even says so on its Division of Elections website. After the show, New Jersey confirmed that 6,600 non-U.S. citizens were registered to vote in that one state, and about 400 of those people actually cast a ballot. The Department of Homeland Security says there are actually 35,152 non-citizens registered in New Jersey. Whether it's 6,000 or 35,000, New Jersey Governor's own office, Democrat Mickey Sherrill, now admits to non-citizens voting in their elections contrary to the law. Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show. I'm Jenny Beth Martin.
Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
It's Monday, July 27th, and there are 99 days until the midterm elections. 99 days. And the single most important thing Congress can do to protect those elections is to pass the Save America Act, which will require proof of citizenship to register to vote and voter ID to cast a ballot. That's it. It's pretty simple. Last week, the House passed it. In fact, the House passed it 2 different times and a half, folding it into the annual defense authorization bill by a vote of 216 to 212. And that bill now sits in the Senate, and the Senate wants to go on vacation. But some senators are refusing to go quietly. Mike Lee said the Senate doesn't need a summer vacation as much as the country needs this law. Senator Rick Scott said he'll stay in session until it passes. Jim Banks is with them. And just this morning, Senator Ashley Moody of Florida said she will not agree to recess until the Save America Act is done. In addition to the National Defense Authorization Act, which is also known as the NDAA in Washington, D.C., the House added voter ID to the Stop Insider Trading Act. The Democrats claim to be for voter ID, and they also say they don't want politicians to get rich from non-public information gleaned from their positions of power while in office. So we should be able to get 60 votes on this bill in the Senate, right? We'll see if the Democrats are actually honest or not with how they vote on that. Finally, the House is working to add the Save America Act to the Reconciliation 3.0 bills. And reconciliation bills only require 50 votes, not 60. Now, last week, they also added it to begin that process of the reconciliation. It's a multi-step process. So they added it to begin it. They unlocked reconciliation, but now we've got to get the full reconciliation bill, which we will probably get in late August. At any rate, the point is the House is doing its job and has passed it time after time in the last week. We need the Senate to step up and do the rest. Now, there's a lot more to cover than just this. Last week, the president had an executive order and took aim at the Smithsonian, saying that it's not telling America's story straight. And the president directed Signs to correct the record. The Historian Guild says it's not true. So who is right? We're going to get into that. And later, the Fauci Diaries are out. Illinois counties are in open revolt against their own state government. And Jim Jordan's criminal referral of Jack Smith is still sitting at the Justice Department. To help me work through all of this, I've got a terrific lineup this final Monday of July. Driena Sixto of the Lincoln Media Foundation joins me on Iran, the Save America Act, and the Smithsonian fight. Curtis Houck of Newsbusters takes us inside the media's meltdown over the White House Correspondents' dinner. And my co-host Robert McNeily is with me for the full hour. Before we go any further, here's what I need you to do today. Pick up the phone and call the Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121. You know this drill by heart by now. Tell both of your senators 2 things. First, pass the Save America Act. And second, do not leave town until you get the Save America Act passed. For more information, for talking points, for answers to frequently asked questions, go to passthesaveamericaact.com. remember, we're 99 days out from the election. We need to get this bill passed into law right away. Robert McNeily is joining me now. Robert, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on co-hosting again.
Oh, thanks, Jenny Beth. I appreciate it.
And also joining both of us is Driena Sixto, who is the Spanish media director for the Lincoln Media Foundation and is a Cuban American voice who has spent years getting citizens engaged and to the polls. And we've seen her from everywhere, from Fox News to Univision. Driena, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, thank you guys for having me here.
All right, so let's get started with Iran, because yesterday we saw that the president has paused new strikes on Iran. I guess it was really over the weekend. And Iran turned around and said it'll stop only as long as we, America, stops. Driena, is that a real concession from Tehran, or is that a regime trying to just sort of pause so it gets more time to regroup and regain ground?
Well, if time is what they need to regroup and think things through instead of making dumb decisions that would negatively affect them, then they can take whatever time that they want to do that. I think that the measures the U.S. has taken is just very obvious peace through strength, right? That doesn't mean consistent strength, right? We use strength, we use strategic bombing and military action so that we can then come back to the negotiation table and resolve things through diplomacy, which is a stage where we're currently at right now with Iran, right? And hopefully this period of time lets them reflect so that they give in the concessions that this country needs to make sure that we have a long-term agreement, which is making sure that we are able to check their facilities so that they don't have any nuclear capabilities in the future. Those are one of the concessions that they would have to give, and obviously stop any further attacks themselves or through proxies in the area, as well as keep the Strait of Hormuz open for commerce, right, and for mobility. So I think those are the main three things that the U.S. is trying to get out of this entire situation. It's important because the U.S. has to take care of the national security threat that would be a nuclear Iran, right? And so I think that right now we are in a stretch that could have a positive outcome, right? We're done with the bombings. There's a somewhat ceasefire going on right now. This could be the end of it as we know it. It will just, time will tell if they'll come to the negotiation table with what it is that the U.S. needs.
Yeah, I agree with you that time will tell. So there are some people on our side who have a bit of war fatigue, and then others who want to see the president finish the job in Iran. How do you think the president is going to be able to keep his coalition together and make sure that we make it through the midterm elections while we are still fighting to make sure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon?
Yeah, I think the main thing right now that Americans want to see is not having another all-out 20-year war. I don't think anybody wants that. I don't think it's beneficial for U.S. citizens, for the U.S. economy, and I don't believe it is this administration's intention to go that route. I think that's why we've been doing these strategic targeted bombings and have agreed to pauses with that as well, so that we can give space and time for negotiations and diplomacy. This president is known for being somebody that brings other countries and their leaders to the negotiation table one way or another, right? Instead of signing on to long-term military action. We haven't seen that throughout this presidency. We didn't see that in the last term, right? And so I don't think that that's the intention here. So I think that will quell the anxieties of American voters come the midterm elections. I think that because of this slowdown in confrontation and physical confrontations, we've seen the prices of oil go down temporarily. I think that if we continue that track, it will also reflect on how positively Americans look at the economy and the outlook on that. So I think that Americans have learned from how this administration, how this president has dealt with issues in the past, to trust the process a little bit, right? For whatever reason, the man is able to get otherwise known as irrational or crazy world leaders to come to the negotiation table and talk to them. I mean, the man crossed into North Korea himself. He's had discussions with Putin, right? I don't think this case would be much more different. I would hope that that is not the case.
Exactly. Robert, you've been following this one very closely. What are your thoughts about it?
Well, I think that you look back 20 plus years, Jenny Beth, rightfully America and the American people weary of war. But there's a distinction here, as Driena so articulately put, the fact that this is something of necessity. We've had 47 years of presidents, of attacks on our Marines, on attacks on civilians, and 13 plus proxies throughout the Middle East, and the attacks here on the homeland by radical Islamic terrorism. This president not only has the technology behind him, the correct intelligence, the fortitude of this cabinet, the amazing work of Secretary Rubio and Secretary Hegseth, of course, General Dan Raisin Kane, who is not the TV general. He is a real general, a good man serving his troops and serving the Pentagon as a whole and the American people to stop this radical regime and, God willing, bring peace throughout the Middle East. It's been historic ever since the Abraham Accords. The fact that these once rivals, these once bitter enemies, when you look towards places like Saudi Arabia to Egypt, Jordan, once did not even have talking terms with the state of Israel in its inception in 1948, coming now to 2026. But the biggest thing here is that America and its interests have been under attack by the Iranian regime for the last 47 years. And I know it can be tough at times, but it's about them not having a nuclear weapon. And Europe is within the target zone of this. It's something to worry about for the Western world. And once and for all, to stop these people who have been attacking the American people, our interests in our military for the past 47 years, much different from the Iraq engagement under the Bush administration.
Very good there, Robert. Let's turn to what I opened the show with, which is the Save America Act. Driena, you have spent your career getting people registered and to the ballot box and doing it the right way. This bill just asks for proof of citizenship before registering to vote. 50 senators are already on the record for the House-backed version of the bill, and the House now is attaching it to many different bills, including last week they attached it to the National Defense Authorization Act, which is also called the NDAA. They're working to add it to Reconciliation 3.0. Senators Mike Lee and Rick Scott are calling for the Senate to stay in session until they get it passed rather than going on the August recess. How confident are you that the Senate is going to get this passed before the elections this year? Do you think they'll suspend the August recess? And why do you think the Save America Act is important to pass?
I would hope that they suspend the August recess if they haven't passed the Save America Act by then, as they should. I think that it will pass because, well, everybody is going to be up for re-election at one point. And if they were one of those people that voted against election integrity, basic common sense election integrity that you see all across the world, right? Proof of citizenship. I think that that would be the opposing campaign's slogan to primary whoever voted against it, or whoever runs against any senator that didn't agree to vote for the Save America Act. This is an issue that over 80% of all Americans support and believe in. So this is pretty much a nonpartisan issue. I mean, it is a nonpartisan issue. Across the world and in this country, people want to make sure that we can trust our elections. This is common sense. This is just a common sense legislation. There have been so many nonsensical reasons that the opposing party has given on not passing this legislation, on making it harder to access certain documents. I think that maybe those are some of the nitty gritty details that we can come to the negotiating table with them on, so that then there's absolutely no objections whatsoever. So making it easier for people to obtain certain legal documents that they would need to prove their citizenship status. Let's do that, right? Making the process simple, making the process free, whatever, the barriers that they may complain about are, let's get rid of those and then say, okay, well, now what's the problem, right? But I don't think that's the main thing that they truly care about. The reality is that, unfortunately, there is a vested interest in some people in making sure that there's no way to verify American citizenship for elections. And it's usually the same people that support open borders or broad amnesty, right? And I think everybody watching this whole situation play out understands that. And so I think it's going to benefit Republicans in the midterm elections if the Save America Act is not passed, because people that are in the center, independent, more centrist Democrats are going to see just how far to the left some members of their party have gone. And so I think this will, help them out. So that's just my prediction.
Yeah, I think that it is going to pass. There may be some changes to it. And I've seen some people online complaining about that, going, oh, you're compromising, you're giving it. No, changes to bills, that is normal. It's part of legislating. That's what happens. Sometimes you have to give a little bit and adjust the language in order to get the final product so you accomplish the goal. And in fact, we have seen changes to the current version of the Save America Act from the original version of the SAVE Act. And Chip Roy really did a great job. Congressman Chip Roy really did a great job of going in and addressing some of the concerns, like when the left was saying, oh, it's going to cause a problem for women who are married or divorced. They went in and even elaborated further to make sure it was very clear that if for whatever reason a person doesn't have the documentation that they need, they can attest to the fact that they are a citizen, explain what the name changes were, give whatever evidence they actually have for it, and make it. The point is, and so that would be done like through a sworn affidavit. But the point here that I'm trying to make is that he's already gone in and we've made changes to the bill. And if there are more that need to be made to get us to 60 votes or to get us to 50 votes, whichever avenue they take, let's get it done. We need to make sure it's only citizens voting. And what we saw last week out of New Jersey, with at least 6,600 people who are non-citizens on the rolls, 400 of whom voted, and as many as 70,000 plus at the Department of I think it was DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, said it are on the rolls in New Jersey. There clearly is a problem. And last week, also in the state of Alaska, it was revealed in Alaska, it's such a small state compared to New Jersey, that 3,000 non-citizens may be on the rolls in Alaska. So we've got to get this done. Driena, could you, one of the big arguments that we keep hearing from the left is, oh, well, it's already illegal, so we don't need to pass this law. Can you explain why, even though it's already illegal, we need to pass something to enforce the law?
Yeah, absolutely. This applies to pretty much every crime in America, right? If you rob a grocery store or anybody, then there is a consequence to doing so, right? It's that there's so many situations where we already have to show voter ID in everyday life that it makes absolutely no sense to not require it. I mean, just the other day, Olive Garden, a pretty famous and popular chain restaurant, announced that they were selling unlimited pasta passes, right? So that for an entire month, you could go into their stores and eat as much pasta as you want. And so the people that bought those passes know that they have to show their photo ID to verify that they are the person that bought the pass, or else it would just be getting passed around to a bunch of other people and the system wouldn't work. This is the same situation, guys. The system would not work if we cannot verify that people are who they say that they are. And this isn't about pasta. It's a lot more important than that. This is U.S. elections and making sure that people have faith in those elections. So that's what this is really all about. This is just making sure that there's a verification process to not to the system, right? Because pretty much then you have to go by an honor system, right? Of course, it's illegal to vote in federal elections, but if you've got no proof to back it up, if you don't put a system in place to verify that people are citizens before they register to vote, then it's pretty much unenforceable. And then there's just utter chaos. On top of that, I personally think that there should be very serious consequences to voting in elections when a person knows that they are not allowed to. And I think we need to make an example of those that have already done so, because that's another part of enforcement, right? If there's no consequences to those actions, then people are just going to repeat them. And hopefully those in New Jersey that did vote in the last election, those around 400 individuals do see the book of the law just come down on them.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that. And our state governments have to quit giving out voter IDs and registering people who are not citizens to vote. It's not fair to the non-citizen to be put in a position where they have to go and remove their name from a voter list, especially if they weren't even trying to register to vote in the first place. It's unfair and wrong of the state governments to do that. And then if they know they're not supposed to vote and they did so anyway, then that's a problem and they have to be held accountable for it. It is a mess and we've got to get it clean. Robert, very quickly, explain why it's important for the House to have attached the Save America Act to bills like the National Defense Authorization Act and to what will become the Reconciliation 3.0 bill.
Well, Mike Johnson and House Republicans leadership doing an amazing job. We've really detailed that here on the show better than anyone else, Jenny Beth. Now it's Reconciliation 3.0, also that National Defense Authorization Act in order to really fund our military, make sure they have the assets. We actually have to turn people away now because so many people have joined the military in the second term of President Trump, but also to make sure that they are completely funded and have the munitions in order to take on this very evil enemy overseas. But in addition to that, it's dealing with a parliamentarian, this arguably unconstitutional position that's really been used post the Civil War and mid-19th century into really becoming a household name now, something that you would not necessarily hear of unless it was this individual blocking time and again this changing legislation that will really bring so much common sense and that enforceable nature when we pass the Save America Act because of the Byrd Rule and other things that are declaring discretionary and other budgetary items on the docket. So that's why they had to really build it out last week in such an extraordinary way with such a slim majority. Kudos again, hats off to House Speaker Mike Johnson and Republican leadership for getting all what they had to get through, not only to defend the United States of America, not only at home, but abroad, but to ultimately once again pass the Save America Act. The House of Representatives has done its job. It's time for the Senate to do it. And President Trump putting out there on True Social today that the party that gets rid of the filibuster really will rue the day and have the opportunity to be in the majority as a result of this. And I tend to agree with the president on this.
Okay, the last topic before we go to a break. The president signed an order last week saying the Smithsonian, which is America's, well, let me rephrase this. The Smithsonian American History Museum, which is the entire Smithsonian is funded by over $1 billion of our tax dollars. He signed an executive order saying that the Smithsonian American History Museum is not telling the story straight, and he has directed signs near the museum to flag what he calls inaccurate information. The Historian Association is firing back and called that claim, quote, simply untrue. Driena, you chose this country. You didn't inherit it. And before you answer this, can you tell a little bit about about your story. I watched some clips of you online. Your family came here from Cuba, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my
And
parents came here from Cuba. Yeah.
and then were you born here or were you born in Cuba? I don't.
That's okay. I was born here. My sister was born
Okay.
here as well. My parents were married in Cuba for 10 years, did not have children because they did not want to have children under a communist regime. So, with my dad's activism against the dictatorship, the communist dictatorship in Cuba, after being jailed as a political prisoner over there, he was able to ask for a visa at the U.S. Embassy, and he was granted that. He has not been back to the country since. He is a refugee. And I have not gone to the island ever myself either because I consider the US my home. I am extremely thankful for the opportunity of this country embracing immigrants that come here for the right reasons, right? Because they're ideologically aligned with what this country represents. And every single country has a history that may reflect some things that were done poorly in the past, but no other country in the world has recovered from that as quickly as the US has. And for that, I'm grateful. For that, I'm thankful. And we should be highlighting the positives of this country to get to the point of where we are right now, the most free country in the entire world for minorities. So different races, different sexes, different backgrounds. Nobody else in the world has it as good as we have it here. That's why there's so many people trying to come in flocks every single day. So I think absolutely we have to make sure that a publicly funded, a taxpayer funded institution is not outwardly and broadly trying to indoctrinate Americans to hate the very country in which they live and in which they have so many different opportunities.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And but before we let you go, because of your history and your family's history, I have found that the people who have come to this country and have escaped communism, whether it's from China, from the former Soviet Union, or from Cuba, it seems like those are the areas that stand out the most. And I don't know that I've met people who've come from North Korea, though I think North Korea would be one of the absolute worst standing communist countries that there currently exist. It seems to me when I have met the people who are immigrants from those countries, they are the ones who are the most adamant about us not going back down that path of socialism, understanding that socialism leads to communism. As you see what's happening in the Democrat Party and with the rise of the Democrat Socialist of America, what do you think about that? How does it make you feel? How does it make your parents feel?
I think that, especially having Cuban parents, they'll always say, we were right. We were right. If you don't watch, for the freedoms that you have within this one generation, we can lose it. Communism and socialism is always lurking in the background, looking for the opportunity to entrench itself in our politics and in our country permanently. That has always been the case. So it's kind of funny, but it's not. Because there's so many elder Cuban Americans that people maybe laugh at them for being, kind of crazy and saying, oh, this country is going to go down in communism if we don't stop it. And they'll call them, just irrational or, old crazy Cubans, to put it simply. But they're not crazy, and we're seeing in this country the rise of a radical fringe of democratic socialists that are now winning elections, right? We would have never thought of that being the case back under McCarthyism, where we were so wary about socialism being a problem. But we have outward socialists winning elections and changing and creating policy, right? We have Mondani in New York that is imposing a pied-à-terre tax, which is basically telling people that have additional properties over $5 million that you are going to have to pay an enormous amount of money for the crime of having more than one property. That is, if that's not straight up socialism, I don't know what is. I don't know to what additional lengths we will see socialist action in place. As a result, we're seeing a huge migration from New York City to freer states. We've definitely got a lot of those New Yorkers here in South Florida. And so we really do need to address this problem at the root. I think that unfortunately, the people that have never known what it is to not live in a free country sometimes may not understand the value of what they have. And so they're more willing to lose it, or they're more willing to be sold a pretty story about how things are in Europe and how they have socialism when they don't actually have socialism either, and they say it themselves. Or there's people that come to this country for the wrong reasons, and it's not to see what they can do for this country, but rather what this country can do for them. And those are the people that are also going to be advocating for socialism, i.e. voting for the fish out of somebody else's pocket if they are given the opportunity. And so that's why I think we have to be so much, this is tied into, immigration and our election integrity laws, because there are people that will use their vote to impose socialism, to impose communism, to do whatever it is they need to do to take out of their neighbor's pocket. And we can't allow that, right? And that's why I have been doing this for such a long time, over more than the last 10 years, and will continue to do so.
Well, I thank you for doing this, and I thank your parents for teaching you the real history. And I think that's the problem with what we're seeing from the Smithsonian's American History Museum. When they're not teaching the real history, when they're honing in and only looking for the negative, and they're not teaching the positive, and they're not teaching how our system has helped more people rise out of poverty than any other system in the world, when we don't teach that we have helped people escape from communism and have liberty and have freedom and have opportunity here in this country, then we're doing a disservice to the current generations. But your parents made sure you understood what socialism and communism looked like, and you've been able to immediately spot it because of that. And I am thankful for you and for your parents for doing so.
Thank you. I'm thankful as well.
All right, that's all the time we have today. But Driena, I'd love to have you come back on the show sometime, and instead of me asking you news of the day questions, just have a long interview and let the audience get to know you better, because you are a terrific young voice, and more Americans need to know about where you stand and be able to follow you. And I'd love to do that sometime.
Absolutely. I'll be there.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining me. And Robert, I'll have you on after the segment with Curtis, and I'll get your opinion about the Smithsonian then. I'll
look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be back with Curtis Houck from Newsbusters. You are the grassroots of America. You love this country. When you love something, really love it, the news doesn't just inform you, it fires you up. And you find yourself asking, how can I make a difference? That is exactly what this show is built to answer. Never, ever, ever, ever give up. We owe it to every American who has ever voted to make America great again. We owe it to our future selves. We owe it to this republic to stand tall, to stay active, and to be smart about how we spend our energy so that we can win. Here on the Jenny Beth Show, we're going to help you do exactly that. Every show, we will break down the news, connect it to first principles, and give you specific, effective ways to take action. Not just outrage, action. And I am so glad you're here on this journey with us to do it. So let's get to it.
Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
Welcome back to the Jenny Beth Show. My next guest watches the media so you don't have to, and nobody clips better than Newsbusters does. Curtis Houck is the managing editor of Newsbusters at the Media Research Center. Curtis, welcome back to the show today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So you wrote a piece about the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and now that it finally was rescheduled, it happened on Friday night, and thankfully, no more incidents, no attempted attacks on the president's life on this one. The president showed up. He gave some really big moments. Talk to us and tell us about everything that you saw that stood out, and then I'm going to ask you some specifics about it when you finish.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, it was held at the Waldorf Astoria, formerly known as the Trump Hotel. So a lot of listeners, viewers may be familiar with that. They may have visited it themselves. So they moved it there, not because the president used to own the hotel. They did it because of the security measures in place and multiple entrances and exits, so that it was sealed off from the rest of the hotel. So the attendance dropped. It was only about 700 people from well over 2,000 for the previous one. And then when it came to the actual content of it, it kind of unfolded about the way that you would expect. The awards, which were announced well in advance of the first attempt at having a dinner, 5 of the 6 categories were for anti-Trump reporting, everything from Trump and Epstein, to Trump stressing American institutions, to Trump and Zelensky, to the misleading photo of Trump standing after a man fainted next to him in the Oval Office a few months ago. And then he came to the president's speech. The president was long, really long, actually, but he had some great jokes. And the reality is, Jenny, for as vicious as the president might have been in some people's opinions, and I would not necessarily have delivered some of the lines he did, the reality remains the press say all kinds of negative things about this president, and they refuse to be able to take and dish it back. They dish it out, but they can't take it back. We all know someone, Jenny, in our lives who is like this, that they'll make fun of you, they'll rib you, but the moment you throw something at them, they can't take it back, and they get all insensitive about it. They get really upset and thin-skinned, and that just goes to show how there's no profession in this country, even more than elected officials in Washington, Jenny Beth, that are averse to outside criticism than the liberal elite press.
They really are. And normally you have a liberal president taking on, and I suppose he's doing a little bit of roasting of the press, but he definitely will roast. They have no problem going after Republicans and conservatives, none whatsoever. And usually the president gets a little bit roasted in these events as well. So it's just supposed to be, you're supposed to have fun with it. And maybe you don't like the jokes all the time, but it is what it is. But this one, I watched some of the jokes that he gave. I was laughing at, but the room was not receptive to.
Yeah, and I was surprised that there was one that I loved in particular, which he talked about that, my administration's had many accomplishments. I'm paraphrasing here, but, perhaps none more so than an evil regime has been toppled. Its leaders replaced by a gay dictator beset with infighting. So I want to congratulate Barry Weiss for her work at CBS News. Obviously, the joke is about the new Iranian Ayatollah and the rumors out there about him being gay. And talking about CBS News, and for whatever reason, the press didn't like that one, even though they really hate CBS News at this point. So they should have really enjoyed that one. So it just goes to show again that these people cannot take a joke. They just don't like the presence of the president there at this dinner that he finally decided to attend. He sat there through the dinner. He sat there through the awards. I will say, though, that the current White House, or now the now former White House Correspondents Association president, Li Zhang of CBS News, gave a really good speech that I actually think folks should actually watch. She talks about how reminding to her colleagues, which I think needs to be reiterated all the time to them, that the First Amendment is about all of us. If viewers and listeners don't take anything else away from what I say, if they take nothing else away, know that the reminder that the First Amendment applies to all of us. The press and the people inside the room there at the Correspondents room want you to believe, as always, that the First Amendment only applies to them and that journalists are like even more special Americans, unique, embodied with by God or the government with more rights than the rest of us. And that's certainly not true at all. And what she pointed out is criticism done well is something that they should be able to take and be receptive of. Because for as much as they talk about how we serve the public, we serve the American people, well, if the customer, the American public, has things that they don't like about us, we should listen to them and not automatically think that they're out to get us. And so I really enjoyed that part, but I don't know how well they were paying attention to that one or how much they're going to take that to heart. And the president, he loves the press. He's in lawsuits and all kinds of other tussles with them legally and rhetorically, but it is a New York real estate guy who lives for being on the cover of the New York Post and the New York Times. he engages in the press, and that is a level of transparency we've never had before.
Yeah, he certainly believes that there is no such thing as bad press. All press is good press, in his opinion. The president of the White House Correspondents Association, I don't know how to pronounce her name.
Zhang.
Her speech I thought was really good, talking about growing up. She's lived the American dream, and a lot of people.
Her parents fled communism. To go back to your last segment, they fled communism. Her dad had like $67 or something like that. And they opened up a Chinese restaurant in a coal country, West Virginia town of 5,000 people. They were the only 3 Asians in the entire town. And yet they had a very successful Chinese restaurant where she had to work it every day. So she had to find time to sit in a booth and do her homework. And she talks about this like American dream. And I'm like, this is, talk about a love of America and patriotism and freedom. We need more Americans to have that kind of humility about themselves.
Yeah, and her speech, it had a little bit of woke stuff, and I've seen some people complain about that online. They were one of 3 people in the town she was one of 3 people in the town who were Asian. Of course, she felt a little bit different. Of course, that happened, and I wouldn't discount it. But that community welcomed them. They had a successful business. She talked about how they would bring in the hunters would bring in deer meat, and that it tasted great stir fried, and and then while she was sitting in those booths, they would have the news on in the background. They had CBS on with Dan Rather and Connie Chung, and she decided she wanted to go into media. And her middle school teacher helped her apply for some scholarship or I don't remember the exact thing, but she got into a program with the help of her middle school teacher, and that teacher was sitting there in the audience at night, and she was thanking the teacher. I just think that it really is the American dream. And I don't care what her politics are. I really couldn't. I don't care. It was an amazing story. I'm glad she told it there. I think that the whole world, and especially Americans, need to listen to it and understand we really do have the land of opportunity. And that is also part of what the First Amendment is about, telling your story. And our Constitution and our entire country is designed to help people flourish and pursue what they want to do, as long as they're not infringing on other people's rights.
Yeah, I mean, you take Weijia Zhang's story, she's very clearly slightly left of center, and then you take it partner that with people like John Fetterman and his moral clarity about Israel and Cuba and communism writ large, and you say, these are the Democrats where we can have a country. We can have a country with people with differing political beliefs, but we all have a respect and understanding for and appreciation for freedom and the people that came before us. Unlike what we're seeing with Mayor Mamdani and others right there, you do get to the point where you're so frustrated and you say, it's really hard to have a country where we can coexist with people that have such a visceral hatred of the country and of our fellow Americans, and specifically a group of people in the Jewish people who have suffered so much through some of the most odious levels of discrimination and mass extermination in human history. A lack of moral clarity about the very basics of being children of God. You do get to a point where you just say, it's so frustrating. You want to throw your hands up and say, how are we able to work with these people? But when you take people like what Weijia talked about in her speech in The American Dream, and then also, John Fetterman there, and you say, okay, this is left that we can work with, but it's very clear that the news media in this country, Jenny Beth, have gone in with the Mamdani side and the Bernie Sanders side because they see this is where the energy is.
Yeah, they do. I think that you're right. They see that's where the energy is, and they're trying to get clicks and eyeballs and ultimately more revenue for their outlets. So there's a little bit of self-serving going on, even if they don't want to admit it, and they think that they're holier than thou and above all of that. Okay, one of the moments that everyone is talking about from it is President Trump and what he said about Bruce Springsteen. Let's roll this clip. It's pretty short, but let's roll that.
But at a recent Bruce, all he did was talk politics. He ought to run for office. That'd be interesting. But all he talked about, he made 4 political speeches in his 3-hour show. The tour has been renamed Bored in the USA.
So President Trump is having fun with it, bored in the USA. He's trying to be a bit comedic with it. And now there are rock legends who are lining up telling Springsteen to knock off the political lectures in his speeches, while at the same time, the NAACP was giving him an award on Friday night. So what is your reaction to this, and what is it that you're seeing from the press corps?
Yeah, I will say when Bruce Springsteen came through the Washington, D.C. area, had a big concert in Nats Park, I believe a month or two ago. Liberal journalists were all there. They were really excited about it. Jim Acosta thought it was like the greatest thing ever. And that goes to show that's where he is right now. That is where Springsteen's base is. Bruce Springsteen is the faux macho working man. You recall that during the Obama years, he would frequently hang out with Barack Obama. I believe they even did like a coffee table book together. That's who Bruce Springsteen is. So I'm not surprised that landed like a lead balloon in the press, or among the press at the dinner there, because it's certainly true. It's one of those very kind of pun, kind of it's very dad joke kind of line, but it would be a thing if in a different audience, I think people would have laughed at that one.
Yeah, I think that you're right. Had it been a different audience, they probably would have laughed at it. And it's better to laugh at it than other ways that you could react to it. That reminds me of one thing. Back in 1992, I went to a U2 concert. So it's dating me because I'm old. And at any rate, I went. And during that concert, Bono was getting up on stage at every single concert and calling the White House and complaining about the Iraq war at the time. And he just would call, he'd bring his phone out, made this whole big deal about it. And I was having so much fun at the concert and dancing and everything. And then he did that. And my friends and I, we just all sat down. I was really annoyed. It bothered me quite a bit. It was a few months, maybe about 8 weeks before Election Day. And I thought it was just ridiculous. And it kind of was a buzzkill. And I have a feeling there are other people who are going to see Bruce Springsteen. They love his music and they don't need a political lecture. They just want to go and have a good time. And it would be good for them to remember that. Peter Baker of the New York Times said it's time to rethink the whole entire dinner. And then we have Brian Stelter, who also was whining about the dinner. Why is the media just so angry, and now they're so anti the White House Correspondents' dinner now that Trump spoke?
Yeah, Peter Baker, that one in particular was rather nauseating. Of course, Peter Baker, friend Red Steez, Stephen L. Miller on X frequently posts anything. When there's a hot take from Peter Baker, a still photo of Peter Baker and Barack Obama or Joe Biden shaking hands when he won an award for some very uncritical reporting of Biden during a previous White House Correspondents' dinner. Peter Baker notes that the Times has not been attending the dinner for, I think, almost 20 years, except whenever they do win awards. Of course, they show up if they win awards. And there's all kinds of reasons to kill the dinner. I would get rid of it because of the coziness between the press and the people that they're supposed to be holding to account, especially when Democrats are in power. It's very chummy. They invite influencers. They invite other famous people to sit with them. And it's all chum, hearty-heart good time because they're part of the same social clubs. They're married to each other. The kids go to the same school, so on and so forth. And that would be my reason to get rid of it. Now, Peter Baker believes you should get rid of it because of what Donald Trump did. Like Donald Trump soiled, he, tore apart at the reputation of the supposedly great dinner that we, the Times, had previously just decided, just as a matter of fact, to not attend unless we're winning awards. So I think that's what you're seeing now from Brian Stelter and Peter Baker is we need to kill the dinner because of what Donald Trump just did, not because it's the imaging and the perception and the reality behind it of how ridiculous the whole thing looks.
Yeah, I think that the dinner is kind of ridiculous. I've never been, but as I've watched it over the years, I think it is. It's exactly they want to rub elbows and say they were there, but I felt that way no matter who the president was. I just think it's very interesting to watch now that we've got a Republican president who's willing to call out the press a little bit and to poke fun at them. Oh no, you can't have any of that. Yeah, well, too bad. Okay, so now shifting gears just a little bit, we hit this in the last segment. The president, and I'm asking you about this because I saw that Newsbusters was also covering this. The president signed an order last week about the Smithsonian and saying that they are the Smithsonian and the American History Museum is completely biased, and they've got to put up signs and warn people that some of the information is wrong inside the museum. The news is freaking out over this. What have you guys found at Newsbusters about the way the press is covering this?
Yeah, so as the headline there implies, we took a look at this. Clay Waters did the NPR critiques the museum. The Washington Post, we saw this as well. We saw this at CNN. We saw this at MS Now. They don't like the fact that congressmen such as Brandon Gill applied the Scott Jennings model of asking questions, which is simply pointing out the hypocrisy and the lunacy in very short, bite-sized questions, and then letting the witness, the head of the Smithsonian in this case, at a House hearing last week, proverbially hang themselves on the stupidity of their wokeness, particularly when it had to do with Mickey Mouse having vestiges in minstrel shows and thus a tool of white supremacy. The Smithsonian, is just like the news media, Jenny Beth. It's one of those things they think we're above the pale. We are the Smithsonian. So basically, how dare you question us? Even though, of course, the Smithsonian receives a lot of its money from we, the taxpayers. So you would think then that Congress should have oversight of it and call out when things are false or money is misspent. And that's exactly what they're doing here. And the left just doesn't like that. They don't refute or rebut the points that are being raised. They're just simply upset that it is happening. And that's always a tell with the left and the news media. When they can't tell you why they don't like something, they just simply don't like it and they think it's outrageous, and they'll go on sort of screed about censorship and McCarthyism. That's how you know that you're over the target.
Yeah, that is exactly right. And I suspect that if we went through all of the Smithsonian museums and walked around all of them, we would find a lot of left-leaning propaganda throughout the entire museums. They're spending over $1 billion every year of tax dollars on the Smithsonian. It makes up over 60%, between 62 to 64% of their annual budget. Yeah, I'd say that we need to have a bit of oversight on that money. And if they don't like it, too bad. Then okay.
Yeah, they could be. Jenny, they could be like PBS and NPR. You defund them. Guess what? They say they're doing great and they're raising money. Good for them, but it's not on our dime.
Yeah. If you think that that's how it is, then you can go try to survive on your own. But otherwise, then understand there's going to be accountability from the people that we elect who are charged with having accountability over institutions like the Smithsonian.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too, from a media standpoint. It's like, oh, this has never happened before. Well, yes, that's true, but that's because it needed to happen. It's a lot of like what we see too with the FCC and what we see at the border. It's things that are not being done, that are being done now that were not being done previously. And if you don't like what is happening, you can simply vote for people that would want to change the policies. That's kind of what this comes down to with the FCC. We talk about that as well. What he's doing with Brendan Carr's doing with ABC News, looking at The View. This is simply enforcing laws and regulations on the books that people in previous administrations of both parties, we should say, just chose not to enforce. And that's what we're seeing here with the Smithsonian.
Absolutely. All right. And then the last topic for you, a co-chair of the Democrat Socialist of America was on television recently, and they were saying that they want to abolish everything and seize corporations. We've got a clip of this. I want to play that and then get your reaction to it.
Jamie Harrison, who was the DNC chair, after you guys had such a big night in New York City and knocking off some of those incumbents and having success with your candidates in the congressional primaries, he said, if you hate the Democratic Party, then don't run for our nomination. Don't you?
I think we may have clipped out of there a little bit early, but what did you make of that interview with Shannon Bream?
Yeah, they go on then to just go through the list. Like, are you in favor of Medicare for all, the Green New Deal? Are you in favor of abolishing borders, abolishing prisons? And obviously the answer to all of those questions was yes, completely unambiguous yes. And the way Shannon phrased them were very straight up. There was no kind of wiggle room to get out of this. And this is the kind of journalism and the kind of interviewing that we need more of with these DSA candidates, to simply put them on the record and what they stand for. I can't just simply say, well, we care about the working class. Well, I think all politicians, at least hypothetically, say that they care about working people in this country. So let's put pen to paper, proverbially, and see where you stand on these particular issues. It's very similar to what you see with the DSA. The left tries to downplay, oh, we're not, being against the Jews, being against Israel is not really like part of who we are. That's just like a side thing that you guys are overemphasizing. And in this case, by putting those things on the forefront, you get them to weigh in and make it clear that, yes, this is actually part and parcel of their agenda. This is part of the fiber of who they are as an organization. And then you can let the voters decide in that regard. But just simply kind of beating around the bush and talking about, oh, the system's rigged and whatnot, it doesn't do the public any good.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Center is really phenomenal.
Thanks.
Okay, and we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Robert McNeily is going to close out the show with me, and we're going to go in a lightning round through the last few topics. All right, welcome back. And Robert McNeily is with me to go through the rest of the topics. We're going to go through them really quickly because we're running short on time. Robert, I want to ask you first, what did you think of the Smithsonian and just the absolute bias and misinformation that we're seeing from the report and the executive order from the president?
Well, totally appropriate on the part of the administration and the president. Left-wing indoctrination has hit every aspect of our society. And I think it's alerted people on the right side of history that we have to be involved in the arts. We have to be involved in telling the story of America. That's the very definition of history, and we should be involved in that. So kudos to the president.
And then let's move over to a name a lot of Americans hope we never have to think about again. That's Dr. Anthony Fauci. He's set to testify on Wednesday before the Senate Homeland Security Committee. And this past weekend, Senator Rand Paul, the chairman of the committee, released Fauci's personal diaries. Set it up for people. What did we see in these diaries, and what do you think we're going to see at the hearing?
Oh, yes, and go see it 48 hours beforehand. This website, amazing that the senator's office did this from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, showing the reading room and everything that this man put into his personal diaries. Let's break it down. He was more obsessed with being on the media, competing with President Trump, and having his name mentioned in regards to COVID and everything that was going on during early 2020 into that summer. And of course, what became 2 weeks to slow the spread, according to then Vice President Mike Pence, became really 2 years of a nightmare for most Americans. It's rather ridiculous, and it shows just the narcissism of Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Yeah, it really does. And one of the things that really caught me is the way that in one of the entries, he was talking about how the press is going wild with me, and he was really very excited about his front page write-ups and his explosive fame. people were dying. We were trying to get our country reopened. The economy was collapsing. Business owners were losing their businesses. Many have never recovered since then. We don't hear a lot about that, but we know that that is happening around the country. And here is a man going, oh, look at me. I had so many write-ups and I have such explosive media attention. That isn't the way that you want media attention. That isn't the thing. That is not how you should want to get media attention. You should want it for the great work that you have done, not because a terrible virus and a terrible, even worse response to the virus shut down the world, put people out of business. The protocols that were in place cause worse outcomes in many cases than if we'd had none of those protocols in the first place. And you don't get to go around bragging about how great you are because you had media attention from it. You should have just humbly understood that you had media attention because you had a role and a position and needed to take care of it. It's disgusting. And when I saw those entries from the diary, I personally thought this is what we all suspected about the man in the first place as we watched him up there so smug and acting as if he was so much better than anyone else in the entire room and above any questioning. He confirmed in these diaries what we figured he was thinking about himself. Completely disgusting. Okay, Robert, one last topic. Let's shift gears to it. And this is one that seems to be a genuine grassroots revolt. In Illinois, 33 counties have now voted to explore separating from Cook County and Chicago's grip on the whole state. 7 more put it on the ballot, or I guess they are putting it on the ballot this November. Robert, what is happening in downstate Illinois, and what does it mean?
Well, I went to school in central Illinois, so I understand the plight of farmers and rural America, that they feel they're not represented. 40% of the state actually lives in Cook County, and then you add those collar counties making up 6 of the 102 that are in the Prairie State, and that's 80% of the population. Even with all the population loss from the state of Illinois to elsewhere, especially down here in the southeast United States, you still have underrepresentation. So that's the focal point, and really having that return on investment, especially with their tax money, because they feel as if the city of Chicago has stolen that to really pay for unfunded liabilities and a pension crisis that has skyrocketed property taxes across the entire state of Illinois. So this has been going on, ever since I was in college, and even prior to this discussion of secession from the state of Illinois, or the state of Chicago, as the downstaters call it. It's something similar to what Oregon's experiencing with that movement, trying to join Idaho, because you have one massive city and metro area really making the decisions for the entire state.
Yeah, it's a real problem when that happens. And, it's part of the reason why it makes me think about how it really is why we have a Senate and a House in the United States government. The Senate gives us equal representation among the various states, and then the House gives us representation by population. And it is supposed to help balance things out. But in some of these states, the metro areas wind up ruling the entire state, and the people who live further out don't have the proper representation. And that's a real problem. And they feel like they're getting the very raw end of the deal.
Oh, there's no question about that. And we hope to see that people will be able to stand up and to fight back peacefully and patriotically. But again, when you have these metroplexes that just dominate, it's very easy for someone like a J.B. Pritzker to remain in his hometown of Chicago and really dominate from that Democrat machine that's been placed there for years and years and rule over the entirety of the state there in Illinois.
Very good. Thank you for shedding light on this, Robert. I really appreciate it. And I want to just remind everyone that you are from Illinois originally. So when you're saying it reminds you of what happened back in college, it's because you're from that state and you understand it very well. Thanks for being on, and we'll have you back on the show again soon.
Yes, look forward to it. Thank you, Jenny Beth.
All right, before we go, our call to action one more time. You know the drill. We've got to get the Senate to pass the SAVE Act. So call 202-224-3121. Again, the number is 202-224-3121. 3121. Call both of your senators and tell them two things. This week, the call to action is pass the Save America Act and do not take a recess until you get this bill passed into law. That's it, plain and simple. Call them and make sure they know you are not giving up and you expect this bill to be passed into law. On tomorrow's show, we've got a very special episode. We are going to be breaking down our latest polling from Tea Party Patriots Action with our pollster, John McLaughlin. We'll break it all down, go through every single question, go through the crosstabs, and make sure you have a full understanding of it. But here's the I guess it's a little spoiler for you. The majority of Americans want the Save America Act passed. They want the Senate to get the job done before the election this year. We still have over 80% of Americans, despite everything the left has thrown at it. And boy, have they tried to do everything they can to downplay how necessary it is for only American citizens to vote in American elections. Still, over 80% of Americans want only American citizens voting in American elections. The supermajority want voter ID, and the supermajority want proof of citizenship to register to vote. So be sure to tune in tomorrow with that very special interview with John McLaughlin. I will see you then. This is the Jenny Beth Show, and I'm Jenny Beth Martin. If you enjoyed today's conversation, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. It really helps us reach more people who care about liberty and the Constitution. You can find this and other episodes at jennybethshow.com, as well as Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, X, and your favorite podcast platform.
The Jenny Beth Show is hosted by Jenny Beth Martin. The Jenny Beth Show is a production of Tea Party Patriots Action. For more information, visit teapartypatriots.org.